Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok. My partner in crime, as always, Vasili, Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, brother?
Doing really well, Yariv. The Flyers just announced their official roster on this past Monday here, so we're aware of who made the team, what the lineup's going to essentially look like going into their first game against Vancouver. And the big news, obviously, Jett Luchanko officially making the Flyers. So we have a ton of great topics to talk about. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, dude, and snuck up on me that the season started. So as we record this, the season has already kicked off. The Kraken are losing right now to the Blues 3-2 in the third period. And then the Bruins-Panthers play, and then tonight are the Blackhawks and the Utah Hockey Club. And boy, do they need a name. But
Utah Blizzard, and then
I think the Yeti is the vote right now.
Okay. Yeah, Yeti I saw. I think the Blizzard was one that was up there too. Those are like the two I think at the forefront.
I like Blizzard more than Yeti.
I like both. I'm biased towards Blizzard just because I want to see Avalanche versus Blizzard. I've said this many times before, but I just think that will be hilarious. Oh my god, it's the Avalanche versus the Blizzard tonight.
Yeah.
Who's has the worst snowstorm or something like that.
Right.
But Yetis are cool. That's a fun name.
Well, we'll see what they end up picking, but I imagine they'll announce it during the season and then start next year.
Yeah, do a whole branding exercise.
Yeah,
all that.
All right. Before we get started, let me do my usual spiel here. Just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to this video. If you can like the video, if you like it, hopefully you like it. And subscribe to it. That is the best way to support us and supporting this YouTube channel. Also, hit the notification bell for notifications to find out when these episodes come out. Typically, they're workaround game nights, but anywhere between Monday to Thursday. But we try to do Tuesday or Wednesday most of the time. But it'll be out around between 10 and 12 o'clock, depending on how long we run, how long the processing takes, and all that jazz. And also for the audio version, go follow us on Spotify and iTunes. We're available in other places, but those are the ones that we check regularly. And if you can give us a review there as well, it would be a tremendous help. And also shout out to our sponsors, Jim's Steaks at 4th and South. Again, that's Jim's Steaks. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Make sure to get a cheesesteak. It's getting cold out, so go get yourself a nice hot cheesesteak from Jim's. Also, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. They will be your partner in dealing with the insurance companies and dealing with all the paperwork, the claims, all the stuff that you don't really want to deal with. Summit Public Adjusters will help you. Again, 215-752-0560. And also want to give a brief shout out to our partner, SportsSpider.com. Guys, if you're tired of searching multiple websites for sports news, SportsSpider.com has you covered. They collect the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web and organize them by your favorite teams. If you want to stay as up to date as possible on our Philadelphia Flyers or the NHL in general, hit the link in the description to check out SportsSpider.com. Again, the link is in the description. They will aggregate all of our stuff for you. So look for our stuff at the top. Okay. Let's get into the fun stuff. Flyers news. I guess there's not that much news beyond the roster stuff, and obviously we're going to talk mostly roster stuff. We'll talk a little bit about power play. We'll somewhat review the press conference for Danny Briere and Tortorella, which kind of went back to back in the day. We'll talk about some predictions this year. We'll talk about the Metro, and then we'll talk about kind of team predictions a little bit. And then we'll end a little bit of Swayman talk, a little bit of Phantoms, and a little bit of prospects at the very end. So pretty packed episode. So first piece of news, missing player from the ice, Nick Seeler, got injured in the game against Boston. He took a shot to the back of his leg, laying down to block a shot. Did not play in the third period. He played, I think, one shift in the third period. He is experiencing numbness. It looks like my assumption, I think everybody's assumption, is that it might have hit a nerve. He was listed as day to day. They didn't expect it to take any kind of significant amount of time for him to really recover. This is pretty typical. But so far, from what we understand, I guess I'll give credit to Charlie O'Connor, who, that's where my report is coming from. That Nick Seeler is still experiencing numbness in his leg. He is traveling with the team. They have left as of this morning. They're on their way to Vancouver to start their team exercises and get their season started. Nick Seeler is with them. They did not carry an extra defenseman, even though Seeler is potentially out for this road trip. We have no idea. Having said that, I kind of do expect him to play, just the way Nick Seeler is. But let's hope it's not something like a damaged nerve or something that could take more time to recover from. It would be a shame that he, gets injured before the season even gets started. So the top four, at least on paper, is missing a key link right now. Though it's hard for me to say there's a top four right now. I think there's more a top pairing and then two interchangeable pairings at this point.
Yeah, agreed. I think for Sealer, it's good that they're being precautious with him. It's the beginning of the season. There's really no point to rush him onto the ice. Let him recover, let him get that time that he needs to help with the numbness that he's been experiencing. And as we know with Sealer, he's a really tough customer. So it would be surprising to me, with all this time off between when the injury actually occurred and the Flyers opening night game, that he probably wouldn't be in the lineup. But if for some reason, the injury has maybe gotten more serious or gets worse over the coming days, I think a guy like Erik Johnson is your perfect number 7 to step in and kind of take that spot and fill in for him. And he does do a lot of the same things that we praise Sealer for, just in terms of like being tough in the corners, blocking shots. So it's not the ideal replacement, but he does do a lot of things that are similar. And here is the quote actually from Brad Shaw, who was interviewed by a bunch of Flyers media members today. And he spoke about the injury to Sealer. So Shaw stated, "It's taking a lot longer than we thought. Most of those you get sensation refueling back in minutes, hours at the most. This is a day-to-day thing. I don't want to put him on the ice. Hopefully he'll be ready to go by Friday." So that was Shaw's interpretation of it. So it looks like they're just being precautious, and hopefully he's ready to suit up for Friday.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, this is what Erik Johnson is here for. I assume a lot of people wonder why the Flyers didn't make a call up. I do think there is some wisdom in calling guys up, especially somebody like Ronnie Attard or, Adam Yinning, right? I wouldn't necessarily want to call up Emil Andre, even though he's definitely more worthy of a call up. But the type of role that he would be put in, like you're not going to put Drysdale with Emil Andre, right? Unless I guess you could move up Zamula and play Andre with Ristolainen is an option. But you also don't want him to sit, right? Like Erik Johnson is here to step in. That is why he was brought in at number 7. He's not a sexy selection for a lot of people online, but he is a guy who knows the system, knows what to do, isn't going to make a bunch of mistakes. Like you said, Vasili, he's going to play that physical game. He's 6'4", he's a big body, and that's really something that somebody like Jamie Drysdale does need, who right now is younger. He's not like tiny, but he's also not a big defenseman. And you really want to have that balance on the pairings, right? Like you really want to have at least a pairing that can physically handle bigger players. And Drysdale is not the best at that. Maybe he's even arguably the worst at that of the starting 6. So, you don't want to put him with somebody like Andre. You'd have to kind of shift your pairings around. So I think it makes sense to have Erik Johnson be the guy. But it is a little surprising. But I guess they have confidence in Sealer, coming back on this road trip. Otherwise, you're kind of in a bad spot. But we did hear already that Tortorella said he'd rather play 5 defensemen than call up one of the kids. So we're seeing that in the flesh here.
Yeah, I guess somewhat a commitment to maybe letting them cook and develop in the AHL. I do think Tortorella has a point in the sense that, do you want to just bring a guy on a road trip for 5 games, kind of miss the start of the season with the AHL club just to sit and not even get to play potentially?
Right.
So I see his point with that, and you just have to hope if Sealer isn't ready to go that there are no more injuries and they don't have to, limit themselves to 5 defensemen on the road trip. But that would definitely be a worst case scenario. So hopefully they can avoid that.
Yeah, and a lot of people are thinking like, "Oh, Eric Johnson sucks." Throw in one of the kids. At least they're developing. I don't think that's the right attitude. I don't even think that Eric Johnson sucks. I think he's
As a
slow
bottom
now.
pair guy, I mean, he's a
Yeah,
pretty reliable option.
right, exactly. And he showed us that. Even he did have some bad moments last year when he had to move up the lineup and things were, iffy with the health of the defense. But when he was playing a bottom pairing role, he was definitely very serviceable. And again, we're talking about a road trip here. We're not talking about the rest of the season. So, assuming that Sealer comes back, it's going to be a temporary thing if Johnson plays. And if he doesn't come back, then you will see a call up, right? Like if Sealer, hopefully not, but if he is out longer term, you will see a kid get called up, and then you'll see that mixed in. But I wouldn't necessarily expect it to be Emil Andre, even though Andre is the best of the young defensemen. It just depends on what kind of pairings they're going to go with, because I don't know if they feel that comfortable in having Zamula and Ristolainen be a pairing. Now, Zamula looked very good in preseason.
So did Risto. So
Right. And I guess there's an opportunity you could play Drysdale with Risto, but then you have two right-handed guys on the same pairing. So I don't know. It's not a terrible idea, to put Drysdale on his off wing just offensively. I would feel comfortable with that pairing with Risto with Drysdale. Zamula, he's also not that physical either. So I don't think you want to see a pairing get out muscled.
yeah,
Hockey is still very dependent on size and strength and the ability to hold guys against the wall, to push guys away from the net. So, I think again, Emil Andre is not going to excel at that part of the game in a rookie season, right, or semi-rookie season in the NHL, especially being 5'9".
yeah, and that's why it's better to get Johnson in there. Essentially, if there is an injury, I just think his game style and the way he's playing at this point in his career probably complements a guy like a Drysdale a little bit better than maybe a player like an Andre that you would have had as your first call up. But they both play kind of similar styles, right?
Yeah,
So it's tough to put guys that are very offensive minded and play the same way together, because then who's going to take care of your defensive aspects? So
yeah.
that's kind of why I think that just plugging in Johnson, having him around as that seventh is valuable, because even though he's not, as effective as Sealer is, he still brings a lot of those same elements that Sealer would. So
Yeah. And I do think there will be a time where Andre should get a call up, and I would hope that he's on this team by the end of the year. He looked definitely the best of all of the young defensemen, not at the NHL level. But definitely best to just let him play. He's probably going to play like 23 minutes, 24 minutes a night in the AHL. And the Phantoms could use the help, let's be honest. They haven't looked very good in preseason, outside of one game, but uh, Wilkes-Barre Scranton has just stomped on them twice. They beat them 6-1 and 5-1. Yeah, so Hershey Bears, they did end up beating 4-2, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But their D is, I don't know. We're still hesitant with Lappy, but give him the season here to work through it. There should be enough talent to not get blown out. Having said that, the games where the Flyers were blown out, it was not Alexei Kolosov in net. So let's keep that in mind. Okay. The next piece of news, and this goes right into the next topic because it was most of the discussions in the press conference. But Jett Luchanko, we kind of hinted at it that it wasn't official at the time, but Jett Luchanko has officially made the Philadelphia Flyers. He's at the very least getting his 9-game trial. That makes him the youngest Flyer ever, which is pretty crazy.
yeah, very crazy.
Yeah. Now, I didn't think he would be on the team this year, not because I didn't think he had NHL abilities already. I was kind of definitely on the train of, hey, he's got a pro game, but let's build his offensive game in the OHL. The Flyers seem to be taking somewhat of a different approach here. We don't know exactly how long Luchanko will be with the team. But again, the reason I didn't want to do it is because of the risk involved in it. Not because I don't want to see Luchanko on the team, not because I don't think he can do things well at the NHL level, but because even if he did score in preseason, I would have still preferred for him to go to the OHL because I want him to continue to build his offensive game. Having said that, and Vasili, we'll see if you agree with me at all on this. Having said that, and I mentioned this before, the kid might be an outlier mentally. Like some guys come into the NHL and don't necessarily have this problem where they kind of have a problem keeping up with the mental grind, the lack of success that you can have scoring. There is part of me that does believe that Jett Luchanko could be a complete outlier, and I think not only has he made history for the Flyers, but he's kind of making the NHL the same way Sidney Crosby did, only without the Sidney Crosby ceiling, obviously, and without the impact at the juniors level. But he might have at least that same mental makeup where he can play against men, get his butt kicked a little bit, have some down moments, and really just recover from it. And not only that, not regress into a pure defensive role and always continue to battle for offensive position and to try to take risks and to push the play. He didn't show enough of that in preseason, but maybe he's going to be one of those guys who kind of builds on it slowly throughout the year. We'll see. I'm still not 100% convinced he's going to be here all season, but a momentous occasion, definitely very interesting from a news standpoint.
Yeah, I think from a roster building perspective and just what the Flyers are trying to do with this team, if you would have told me like back when Luchanko got drafted that he was going to make the Flyers the same year he got drafted at age 18, I probably would have been very, very surprised and not believed you. And I think that would have been most people's opinion and reaction to it. For me, like in him making the team, like personally, I wouldn't have put him on the team. I think my perspective is that there was some other players in preseason that stood out to me more. Luchanko did have his moments. I just didn't see him jump out to me every single game. And I think, to make the NHL at age 18 after just being drafted, I think you really have to kind of blow the doors down and, really show why you belong. And I just don't think that he had enough elements there for me. There were a lot of small details and a lot of small things that the coaching staff and Daniel Briere, referenced that were essentially a reason that he made the team, and just his maturity as well was a big sticking point too. But I just think that for a guy who is 18, there's just a lot of risk involved, obviously, in having an 18-year-old player make the NHL right after being drafted. I would say that for him, like if he does have the 9-game trial, that's fine, because at least in that situation, he gets to get a taste of the NHL level, understand what he needs for next season. But firstly, to burn a year off his ELC, I don't think that's something they should do, but who knows how he's going to react and how he's going to continue to progress. Obviously a very smart player. The hockey IQ is very high. So as he's worked through the preseason here and gets into some, NHL regular season games, it's possible that there is a very steep learning curve in the sense that at first he might look a little bit outmatched, but once he gets used to the pace of play, you might see things start to click for him. And that could happen in game 2, 3, 4, 5. Like we're not really sure or kind of aware of when that might happen. I just really didn't expect it. So it was kind of a bit of a shock in the sense that he made it, right? I think, Luchanko's speed, the conditioning, the maturity level, they all appear to be NHL ready. But you have to factor in that, to improve the offensive aspects, maybe playing in like a third line type of role, it could pigeonhole him into like a bottom of the lineup role, more of a defensive role. One of the things that I was kind of hesitant about was, is he going to get to play in all situations with the Flyers? Because with Guelph, he was going to be their top line center, power play, penalty kill. He's getting put out there for a big defensive zone draw. He's getting put out there when they need a goal. I mean, I don't know how he's going to be used in those respects in the regular season for the Flyers. But one thing that does make it more of a positive for me is if you look at the penalty kill units, the power play units, he appears to be a guy that the Flyers are going to put on those units to start the season at the very least.
Yeah.
So that is a positive, right? Because I think for a guy who's 18, if you want him to be such a big part of your organization moving ahead, he needs to play in all situations and kind of get that experience playing in all these different in-game situations. And that was, something that I was concerned about where, will he get pigeonholed into that bottom of the lineup type role, only playing maybe 10 to 14 minutes a night, where he doesn't really get the chance to use that extra space on the power play to develop that offensive creativity, or he doesn't get the chance to play in those, penalty killing situations because the Flyers penalty kill is so great. And I guess, it begs the question, and I'll open this up to you, Yariv. The Flyers obviously are in a rebuild. They've made that known. This is a move that isn't really something you see a rebuilding team do in terms of pushing an 18-year-old right into the NHL level, despite him being ready or not. So what do you think about that? And do you think this is kind of straying a bit from that plan that they have?
Yeah, no, at the surface level, absolutely. It is surprising. And obviously not one that a decision that you and I are behind, but we're also not at the practices. We're not watching every single shift, that he's having against teammates. We're not seeing him behind the room. We're not seeing him in meetings and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say this. When the Flyers have had opportunities to force guys into the lineup, and not even like force guys, bring guys in early, they have turned it down at pretty much every single opportunity, except for Emil Andre last year, where he did have a pretty good preseason. He had a better preseason this year. That was the only time that I saw them kind of speed things up. Maybe Ersson a little bit too, even though he clearly was the second best goalie. He didn't necessarily not look ready for pro. It was just kind of, I wanted him playing. So it was
do you want him to be in that backup role?
Right, exactly. I guess that's in some ways it's similar to that. But if I have a weird tendency to just like kind of trust Tortorella with this stuff, and I know people like want to believe they know better because what we've seen in the past, right? And like you said, maybe this is something that happens to like a contender where they have a third line role open. They're like, we have a strong team and we're going to suit them in there. And even then, I'm like kind of against it anyway. Even if you are a strong team, your better option typically is to be patient because there's less risk involved in being patient. Having said that, they clearly have identified something very unique in this kid. Like what he's doing to not be Sidney Crosby, right? Or Macklin Celebrini even, right? Or Connor Bedard to be like this first overall caliber player and to come in and make the team out of camp. I mean, Zach Benson did it, halfway through the year or something like that? Like, there are cases of this working, and there are cases of it not working, more of it not working, but not all the guys get damaged from their first year too. But they've identified something in Luchanko that some of us clearly we're not fully aware of. They have not really pushed that issue with Russian guys outside of Luchanko.
I think what it probably is for me is the maturity level. Like, we're not really talking to him. We don't see what he's like behind closed doors. You don't see how he's reacting to everything that they're throwing at him in training camp, right? On a personal note. And that's probably what it is. They see how mature he is as an 18-year-old. They see the skills and they're thinking to themselves, hey, there's going to be stretches where this kid struggles. He's 18. He's entering the NHL for the first time in his, young career. Of course, there will be points where he might not be at his best, or there might be times where, he's not making the right play. He does make a mistake and there are struggles. But I think they probably look at that maturity level and think, he's such a mature kid, the way he handles himself, even if he does have those bumps in the road, it's not going to affect his development crucially, like it might with some other guys that are 18 that might not be as mature as he is and might not have that head on their shoulders, right? So that's probably the thing that we're not privy to, just because we're not in the locker room. We're not having those conversations that the coaches and the general manager might be having with him. To your point, I mean, it is a risk in the sense that, confidence is huge for an 18-year-old player and huge for young players in general, especially in the NHL. Like, it does run the risk of him going through, a 2 week to month type of struggle or slump, and that really kind of turns his game in a negative direction. But there's also a chance that he really, is a quick learner, kind of hits the ground running and ends up having a great rookie season just with all the speed that's in his game and the fact that he's going to be playing with guys that are offensive minded and Farabee and Brink that could help him as well. Right. I also do think, like I said, I wrote an article about this all on Monday and put it up on Monday morning. Before that article, went out, like I wasn't privy to the fact that he was going to get power play and PK time. So I mentioned that in the article that, if he's not in all situations, I don't know if I'm a big fan of the move, just because you learn through experience, right? If you're never in those experiences where you need to be on the power play, be on the penalty kill, trying to score that goal to tie it up, trying to defend that lead when you're, up a goal, how are you going to actually improve as a player and know what to do in those, situations, right? So the fact that it seems like leaning towards playing him in more situations than just 5-on-5, that makes the decision a little bit better for me. But yeah, like we'll see where it goes. I really hope that he proves me wrong and that he does a great job to start off and he sticks with the club and is a valuable member as a third line center. I just think there's been so many cases of guys that you've seen being rushed in the past that where the Flyers are in their timeline in terms of contending, I just don't think that it's worth the risk. But like we're saying, right, the coaching staff is seeing other things, the general manager is seeing other things, so we'll see where it goes. Is there anything specifically, Yariv, that Luchanko would need to do on your end to stay beyond the 9 games, or are you just dead set no matter what, like you should send him back?
No, absolutely. I mean, if he produces or at least drives offense, I would be more open to it. I don't necessarily think like anything I saw makes me go like, oh, he doesn't belong in the NHL at all.
Yeah.
Well, again, the concern is that he didn't push possession, right? He did all the other stuff right, but he didn't score. He didn't push possession. In that game against Boston, not the only one, right? That the team was completely ineffective, and that might be what the Flyers were looking at in general. Is like the bad game he did have was a game where the entire team played poorly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, and I wouldn't even necessarily say he had a bad game. He hasn't really looked like. My whole thing is just the risk. That's it. But again, I don't know the kid. I have met people in my life that are considerably younger, and you meet them and you're like, this guy acts like he's 30, and he's like, 20, right? So I've seen this stuff before. Some people do have the mentality for it. Like nobody worries that like Sidney Crosby's development would have been ruined if he struggled, right? Look at Sidney Crosby's mentality on top of his skill, right? He's an all-time great, but his mentality is incredible. I actually just saw a clip about him, how at training camp, they had this, it was called like the 16-round skate, something similar to what Tortorella does. And apparently the one guy, I forget who it was, that was talking about his time with the Penguins. And he was talking about how Crosby was leading the skate. And he thought that like, oh, it's a superstar. He's not going to push it too much. Crosby was at 100% the entire time. Like they were dead. And he was just constantly going. And if you listen to everything we're hearing about Luchanko, he is that type of guy. Maybe he doesn't have the Crosby skill level. 99.9% of players do not. Yeah. But if he has that mentality that Crosby carries, it will still allow him to progress in the NHL. I'm still hesitant, though. Even if he goes past the 9, even if he has points, I'm hesitant. I'm worried about breaking something that I think like a lot of people are like, oh, he's not going to be an elite player. I don't know that. I don't know that he's not going to be elite. Just because you didn't see the guy dangle people in juniors doesn't mean the guy won't be elite. It happens all the time. It also depends on what your definition of is elite. And let's get to the press conference, and I'm sure you're going to want to bring this up. Danny Briere was obviously asked over and over about Jett Luchanko. He mentioned the name that you and I have talked about several times, Patrice Bergeron, being an example. And we compared him to Patrice Bergeron more than we did Nick Suzuki. If you look at Patrice Bergeron's game, it was not fancy dangles. And he never put up 100 points.
No, but he just knew where to be in terms of the IQ. He had the smarts, he had the positioning, and then on top of it, the defensive acumen. And I think Luchanko does have all that with the speed too, right? So if you look at that and you don't want to compare him to Bergeron because that's an all-time great, obviously. But even, with the general manager mentioning him, there's definitely aspects of Luchanko's game that do have those elements of a Bergeron. So you don't see that often. So I do understand in terms of those facets of the game as to why you think he'd be NHL ready, right?
Right. But and I totally agree with everything you said. And he was somebody who dealt with a big injury, if people remember this, Randy Jones.
I do
accidentally
remember.
collided, and they were so pissed, and understandably so. The Bruins were so pissed at Randy Jones, even though it was clear freak accident, similar to the Brandon Manning McDavid injury. But Bergeron dealt with some issues early on, but again, his character, his brain are what separated him. You don't if you actually watch Patrice Bergeron play, he is not like wowing you on every play. And he was an elite player in this league that played on one of the most dominating line that the NHL has ever seen. So when I talk about like Luchanko potentially being elite, I care about a guy who can play the type of role Sean Couturier played for us when he was in his prime. Guy who can play against the best players in the world and still produce offense, anywhere between 60 to 80 points a year, which if you look at Bergeron's production, that's pretty much what it was. That Barkov is more of like a hybrid where he does have a lot of dangles and stuff like that. He's a phenomenal player, one of the best in the world. But Bergeron was on that level without being Datsuk or Barkov, right? So that's kind of what I see from Luchanko is I don't know if he's going to be a Bergeron or, Barkov, hopefully, but can he be a guy who plays against the top players in the world? Yes, and I don't want to ruin him. But again, I kind of trust Tortorella. Like we talk about Tortorella being crazy, and he is a little crazy, but he does see things in players, undoubtedly. We talk about Dubois, we talk about Johansson. A lot of these guys came in with dangles, came in with the stuff that you thought were going to make them the best players in the league. And they didn't become those guys because he saw something through that. And in this case, kind of in the opposite direction.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll just read the quote that Briere had essentially on Luchanko. He said, there's guys that were rushed that never really took the next steps, and there's guys that were rushed and became amazing players. The one player like that that comes to mind for me is Patrice Bergeron. And Briere does have a point, right? That there's tons of examples of guys that made the NHL early at age 18 or 19 and turned out to be really good players. And there's tons of examples where it didn't work out. And sometimes I guess you have to think those examples that didn't work out, maybe those guys were never, had what it took to essentially be really good players at this level. It's really hard to say. I think each circumstance is different in a sense, right? For me and just Luchanko, and if the Flyers are going to keep him past the 10 games, I'm pretty aligned with you, Yariv, in the sense that I just think it's all going to be about driving play and, puck possession for me, really. Like, I think if his line is on the ice, they're consistently getting hemmed in their own end throughout the 9 games, that's probably a good sign that he might be a little bit overmatched right now at the NHL level. If it's the opposite of that, and you see that Farabee, Luchanko, and Brink have a ton of puck possession, they're creating scoring chances, they're using the neutral zone to open up transition chances and rush chances with all three of their speed on that line, then I think that's probably going to bode well for him likely sticking around past the 9 games. Obviously, some offensive production will help too. But we'll just see. We'll have to see. I think it's going to be like a game-to-game, day-to-day type of evaluation with him where unless there's some like glaring issues or glaring mistakes that we see early on, they're likely going to give him these 9 games and then probably make that final decision.
Yeah, no, I think, and there needs to be a progression, right? Like he needs to improve as things go on. I don't think they're closed the door on sending this kid back.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, if he has that strong character, he should be able to handle being sent back and just continue, because they're not going to kick him out and go like, you don't have what it takes, kid. They're going to be like, you are so close. Go build your team. Right, go play, and you'll be on this team next year. He's obviously already on their mind to put him in early. The kid just turned 18. It's crazy. He has a very similar birthday to Crosby, who just turned 18 and then entered the NHL. Crosby's a generational talent. But again, if the mental makeup is there, I think there's something really interesting here. I'm excited to see him. I will say that. I don't love that we have to push Noah Cates out of the lineup because I do think he's a quality NHL player. But I am very curious to see how Luchanko does here. And I think if the coaching staff, which is what we're hearing, they're all behind this. Yeah, it's so funny that the guy that everybody was like down on, not everyone, but a lot of people.
Everybody said, "Oh, he doesn't play young players."
Questioned, that on top of it, but questioned the pick of Luchanko and passing on Zeke Boyum, and then to watch this kid make the NHL, like at essentially 17 years old.
It's a lot of irony involved.
Dude, that's why I'm kind of just like, you know what? I'm open. Like, like none of Luchanko was what I expected. I didn't expect the Flyers to take Jett Luchanko, right? I did expect after scouting him that Tortorella would love him early and that he had pro upside already. I did not expect them to throw caution to the wind here, especially with Michkov coming in here too. And like already having a 19-year-old on the team and then adding an 18-year-old on the team.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. It's exciting. It makes me scared though. I'm a risk averse person, right?
Yeah,
I don't gamble, for instance.
I hear you. I definitely see the risks involved, but I see where the Flyers are kind of excited and they want to get a look at him and kind of see what he can do and see what he can be, right? Like the team, Briere even said in his presser that he wasn't expecting him to make the team out of camp or didn't think he even had a shot, right? So when you're going in with that mentality, and I'm sure Briere had that mentality probably along with the coaching staff, and then you see this kid that you just drafted kind of blow you away day after day. I think that's probably what impressed them, and that's probably where he gets the shot, right? Because he just kept improving and kept sticking out to them on a day-to-day basis. So he's going to have to obviously keep that up throughout the 9 games and show a little bit of progression in the sense that, okay, this is what the NHL is like at game 1, at game 5, at game 9, the pace not considerably gets quicker, but over the season, incrementally, games will get harder. So they have to kind of keep an eye
faster.
on.
I think they do get faster.
They're going to have to keep
possession wise.
They're going to have to just keep an eye on, how he handles that, right? And all the things that come with that. So he definitely seems like he's a mature kid, but I think it's for the Flyers, they just need to really be careful here because you have to look at the development and how important he is to the future. And you want to ensure that, you don't mess with that or you don't, rush him in this year at the kind of detriment of future seasons, right?
Yeah. And they just criticized another team for rushing Jamie Drysdale. Again, a different position. But I've talked about how impactful center is and how important of a role center is and how much there is to pay attention as a center. It's much more difficult than what Michkov has to do coming in and being a winger.
Yeah, well, you got to support your teammates in all facets of the ice as a young player. So.
Defense and offense on a regular basis. So, again, I do think they love his speed. I do think that's the most tempting aspect of it. And they probably see very little downside to him being an irresponsible player. So... it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. And if he struggles, I do expect him to be sent back. And I think it's the right move to make. And I don't think that will hurt his development. I know a lot of people want to be like, oh, he's going to feel so down. And yeah, but the league is full of that stuff. And Luchanko didn't come in to this past year as a big name at all. Actually, he was just given an opportunity and exceeded expectations. So part of me goes like, that is this kid's history. Is like being given an opportunity and exceeding expectations. So I don't know. I'm very curious
if he does it again. Yeah. Essentially, right? And he's done it so far.
And I'm very curious to see how he plays against a team like Vancouver and not a team like Boston, who grinds you down physically. And Vancouver plays kind of a faster run and gun game. And I think in those run and gun games, I think somebody like Jett Luchanko would have more success. So we'll have to see how things pan out. But it's a unexpected move for sure. So on top of that, let's move on to the other young, exciting player. So Briere obviously was asked about Michkov and asked also, did he exceed expectations? Because Briere was trying to tamper. Obviously, they hate the savior thing, and I actually hate that too because I think it's a team game.
It takes a team to get wins. It's not just one player.
Yeah, so. I hate the savior comment as well,
especially in hockey too.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. But he did say, and he kind of tampered that down. He said Michkov would have struggles, but he did say Michkov already exceeded his expectations. He did not exceed mine. I will say that. This is what I expected from Michkov. Maybe that was a little bit fan-ish of me. But again, I just go back to him. Like I saw a video of somebody talking about how Demidov and Michkov are both generational talents and are kind of being undervalued around the league, which I do agree with. And he compared Michkov's numbers in the MHL to Demidov's numbers in the MHL. And he was like, Michkov's numbers, if he like did a calculation, he's like, if you translate it to juniors, Michkov would have had 130 points or whatever. And I was like, and he's like, Demidov would have had 150 some points in comparison MHL to the OHL or the juniors league in Canada. And I commented on it. I go, yeah, but keep in mind, Michkov's pace that you're looking at was a draft -1 year,
Yeah,
and
exactly. Not draft
Demidov's
plus one.
our draft
Or his
year,
draft year, yeah.
his draft year. And I still truly believe Demidov is going to be an exceptional player. I'm not talking down to Demidov, but my whole point is like everything about Michkov's resume screams Bedard. I'm not saying he is Connor Bedard. I don't know if he's going to be as good as Bedard, but everything about his resume screams potential generational talent that will walk into the league and be at least a top 3 to 5 point producer on your team his first season. And when you look at this team and the lack of point producers that we've had, because a lot of them, one, have either been developing or non existent on this team, I'm like, I kind of see him as like to walk in here and, put up some serious numbers in the NHL. So he did not exceed my expectations. What are your thoughts about what Briere said?
Yeah, so I can read the quote. So this is Briere on Michkov. He said he's obviously something the way he plays that we don't have enough of. He's 19, rookie season, a lot to learn. On the flip side, he's been dealing with this pressure already, so he's comfortable. I thought that was a really interesting point because
again, Bedard like.
Yeah, exactly, right? Because in Russia, they kind of expected him to excel in this way just from the way he was playing in the MHL, moving up to the VHL, obviously in the KHL as well, having such success as a younger player. And yeah, Briere said he was impressed, that he's going to the areas to, try to score goals, going to the greasy areas, going to the crease, just being, willing to get to the front of the net. And that's something we've mentioned, right, on the last few episodes, or that I pointed out specifically with Michkov, that he's just not afraid to go to those areas where you need to be to score those goals. And it's not easy to get there, and it's not easy to go there and withstand some of, that punishment that you take when you do get to the net. And it's really impressive, obviously, as a 19-year-old, and it is not surprising to me that's what Briere kind of pointed out and found, that was impressive regarding Michkov. But in terms of what he's done, I don't think he's really like exceeded my expectations, because I did expect him to come in and look really good and play really well. I think the one thing where he exceeded it for me is just how strong he looks in board battles. Like, I knew he was a strong player. I knew that he was competitive and is willing to get into those areas. But most of the time in the preseason, when you saw him in board battles against some of those bigger players, so those bigger bodies, he was positioning, his stick in a way, or like Briere mentioned in the press conference, his skates, or he was just knew kind of how to attack the battle to ensure that he gets the puck. And as a guy that's 19 and, a little bit smaller than some of these other bigger guys in the league, that's just really impressive to see from a rookie.
Yeah. And, I look at somebody like Jack Hughes, and maybe we can put Michkov on Jack Hughes' level. But he came into the league, his first year, he had 7 goals, 14 assists. Again, at 18, Michkov is not 18, -26,
Yeah.
right? Then his second year, he put up 31 points in 56 games. That's a 45-point pace in his second year. So that would be like Michkov's year. So, and again, Jack Hughes hit 99 points when he played near a full season. He's yet to play a full season. The following year, he had 56 points in 49 games. And we talked about Luchanko as well. Again, if you have the right mindset and you are a mature kid, you can struggle at the NHL level and continue to progress. I think Michkov is going to come in and exceed what Jack Hughes did. He doesn't have to play center, so that's a big reason that Jack Hughes had a harder road. But Jack Hughes is also much thinner than Michkov. Michkov is a thick kid. He's 195 already.
He obviously trained very hard for this upcoming season. It definitely seems that, because before, I think last year he was getting listed like in the 170s, right? So he's put on at least like 15, 20 pounds at the most.
I don't believe those weigh-ins, but yeah.
Yeah, who knows for sure.
I never did.
I think, for Michkov, it's just going to be interesting to see how he, translates the preseason over to the regular season, like if there's any bit of like a difference. I'm not expecting it, but I guess we're just gonna have to monitor and see what happens the first few games. But I think starting him off with Couturier and Konechny is giving him all the chance to kind of get acclimated right away, and kind of stating that, hey, we expect you to be in these positions, we expect you
to have an impact positively in terms of offensive production, right?
I think he's going to get even better as the season rolls on too. I don't expect a difference.
Well, he's going to get more comfortable, right? So
yeah, and understand everything better. I think he's also going to get in better shape skating wise than he's been. I think he was somewhat tired during preseason, getting used to that. Again, Luchanko wasn't, which is again shocking to see an 18-year-old do that. But I think with Michkov's case, I think he's just a really special player. So, and I think Briere did the right thing though. Publicly state otherwise. Always, better to, under promise and over deliver.
Yeah, you don't want to put so much expectations.
They're doing the right thing. They're
on a
doing
young
the right
kid.
thing.
Yeah. So the way they're handling it is the smart way to go about it. And I guess to end it on Michkov, we can move over to the last topic of the presser. He did say, Briere, that he exceeded my expectations. He finds ways to make plays. I thought he showed us a lot when he was rested. I think that's also something to factor in just in general, that this training camp is a lot more skating rigorous than a lot of other NHL training camps. So that's also a reason why maybe in some preseason games you're not seeing guys look as energized as they typically would, because they're really going through a lot of skating in training camp. There's a reason and there's a method behind that madness, right? It's conditioning based. Yeah. And we see kind of how the Flyers were last season in terms of their conditioning compared to some of the other teams in the league, especially in the first and second months of the season.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue into the next point he brought up. So he kind of called out the team for one. Well, he did praise them for having a great camp as far as the practices and conditioning and coming in ready for preseason and doing well in the skating and all of that stuff. He was very happy with that, but he did call out pretty much everybody, which I think is honestly somewhat deserved for the NHL regulars to kind of underperform in preseason. I think he probably made a good point to do that and to continue to push that expectation, because if you watch the Standard, he gave them that speech in there, right? Like, you did well last year, but your expectations have been raised. You're not going into this year the same expectations as before. So I think, part of it was them being tired. I also think majority of them were already like, well, we know Tortorella, we're on this team. And I don't think they were that focused on winning, like giving up passes to Michkov to get the empty netter and stuff like that. Like, we're not going to see that stuff in the regular season. I think there was kind of an attitude of comfortability in this, which maybe is also why Luchanko plays into the mix here, where they're like, we'll throw an 18-year-old kid in there. We don't care. Like, whoever competes the hardest and does the best, we're gonna whatever we see in the background here is what we're going with. So I think it was a wise move, because it wasn't a mean shout out, but it was like, it's hard to turn on a switch. We used to say that with Mike Richards all the time. He used to talk about turning it on, and he was kind of a mutant with that he actually did have a switch, but the average team does not. So I like that he called them out. They played okay in preseason. Some guys better than others. But yeah, I thought it was wise.
Yeah, I don't mind it at all. I think, we have to look at it two ways, right? You look at some of the performance of the veterans, and I think it is warranted in the sense that there's probably some games where they could have played a little bit better. You also have to factor in that it's preseason, so a lot of guys aren't going to be, giving a max effort, giving their all, because they're trying to prepare for the season. They don't want to, get injured. And even Briere kind of mentioned something like that. Just to look at the quote specifically, this is what Briere said. He said, "There were too many of you that were a bit too casual during the games." And obviously, if Briere is going to say that in the media, he obviously let the players know himself as well. I do think too, because it's preseason, you have to look at it from a perspective where, Danny Briere is the general manager, right? And his job as a general manager is to get the most out of his team. That's the same thing as John Tortorella being the head coach. Not to say that saying this in the preseason, not preseason, but saying this right before the season begins, it might be a little bit of mind games too, right? Where you're trying to light a fire under your team. You're trying to get them psyched up. You're trying to get them motivated for the season coming ahead. So I think that all factors into it, especially considering Briere used to be a player. He kind of knows what it's like to play in these preseason matchups and how hard it might be to get,
how hard it might be to get invigorated for them or kind of wake up for them and really give your all and max effort. So I think it's a little bit of both, where there's probably some guys you want to see a little bit more from, but it's also a little bit of, let's light a fire under their asses and kind of get everybody ramped up as the regular season is set to open on the Friday.
Yeah. And the last point we can talk about with the Briere presser, he does talk about Kolosov. And he kind of made it clear that the future still is somewhat unknown with Kolosov. They're not necessarily completely against sending him back to the KHL. He did kind of leave the door open for that. And he kind of called out Luchanko in a nicer way this time, but he kind of made it clear that, or I'm sorry, I said Luchanko, Kolosov. He kind of called him out in his, he kind of went, oh, he wanted to play in the NHL, but we wanted to see him. But he kind of stuck to their point that we thought that he needs to be here now. We didn't get to evaluate him. And he kind of pushed that issue, left it open. There was obviously some deal made beyond, in the background here, that they're not going to force Kolosov to be somewhere where he doesn't want to be for the entire year. But I think they're banking on the fact that he will change his tune after he gets here, has a real preseason. He talked about how the team already took him out, kind of, made a half smile joke about how he doesn't even know where the team took him and didn't ask. But just want to make sure that the kid adapts and finds a home here. So I thought it was nice. I thought he did a good job with the Kolosov question.
Yeah, definitely. I think Briere handled it well. And I mean, the situation in general, I guess the Flyers handled well in the sense that they kind of bluffed Kolosov, right? Like they signed Eetu Makiniemi that got him to come over. That's what they wanted all along. It is interesting that they, keep the options open and essentially admit that it's off the table for him to head back to the KHL. I think that would be a rare circumstance to happen here. I think that now that he's here, he's probably going to be here. I think it just makes the most sense going forward for what the Flyers want for him and his development long term. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Kolosov. Like he's looked really good to begin here, just in the couple of preseason games. Also, with his beginnings with the Phantoms to start their preseason as well. I think one thing to note is Kolosov thought that he needed another year in the KHL before making the leap to the NHL. So I thought that was interesting that the goalie's thinking that himself, but it could just be an effect of Kolosov doesn't really want to play in the AHL.
Yeah.
So
it seems more like
what
that.
I think, right?
Well, it seemed more like that when, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it seemed more like that with the way Danny kind of said that. He was like, oh, well, he thinks he needed another year in the KHL, but he also wanted to be in the NHL. So I don't know exactly, he kind of called it out that he just didn't want to develop in the AHL. Like he was happy to come over, but only if it was NHL. It was like NHL or bust in his mind. And that's just not realistic. And we saw the whole case with Askarov, right? Demanding a trade, gets moved to one of the worst teams in the league, if not the worst team in the league, and doesn't crack their lineup with worse goalies ahead of him, and gets sent back to the minors. So it's like, just because you have the attitude of you should be in the NHL, you're a goaltender, it's going to be a long journey to get there.
Nothing's guaranteed as a goalie, and also you have to factor in too, right, that the Flyers weren't going to supplant Fedotov or Urson to have him take one of their spots here. So I think for Kolosov, he probably realized that was the case, and he probably realized if he does want a shot at the NHL, he kind of needs to, get in line in a sense, pay his dues, and then when there is an injury, he will be, afforded that opportunity, right?
It shows what kind of a freak Carter Hart was too. In that, and how he was able to
so young
and excel early. It's very rare. I talked about it nonstop about him, how what he was doing was generational pace, also, or at least top of the league pace. I still believe he would have been the top 5 goalie in the league. We'll see what happens with him in the future. So I guess we can talk about the Torch presser a little bit. It's kind of the same topics.
There's not too much to discuss. Like I have a couple quotes to read.
Go ahead. Why don't you
want me to start with that?
Start with a quote.
Really, I mean, the main theme of Torch presser was a lot shorter than Briere's. I think it was about 8 minutes, while Briere's was like 25.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Really, Luchanko, Torch's comments on Luchanko is what I was most interested in.
Yeah.
It's kind of what he gave the most, interesting answers about. So this is Tortorella on Luchanko. He said, I'm just going to watch him play. There's no particular thing. We do have that 9-game situation we're very well aware of. We will watch him and the whole process will unfold. I'm not going to predict anything. I'm just going to let him play. And he also said, I'm not predicting you guys. And when he says you guys, he's referencing the media. He says, you guys like to say that he should be here. I'm going to let the kid play and then we'll make our decision from there. I mean, that's a classic Tortorella type answer, right? Where he's not really giving much. He's just kind of saying, we have our thoughts on him and why he's here. We're going to watch him play and continue to evaluate and see if he can do those things that got him to this point as the NHL season begins, which, they're going to give him a fair shot and they're going to see if he can kind of keep up what they've loved so far, what surprised them so far and jumped out off the page, which is, those details, the speed, obviously. And I think for Tortorella, the one thing too that we haven't mentioned yet in terms of Luchanko is probably just the center depth, in the sense that I think if this team had, centers like on the third line level that weren't like a Scott Laughton or a Ryan Poehling, that maybe Luchanko wouldn't be in this role, right? So I think if they had somebody that was a little, I don't want to say more offensive. Yeah, I don't want to say more offensively inclined, but I think that's definitely the reason why they want him here, and the speed too. I think those two factors.
To the thing we said about Luchanko, neither one of those guys are play drivers, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're better in a checking role completely. That is where they excel. They can both chip in some offense, but they're never going to drive a line's offense.
Whereas Luchanko's speed, I mean, that will drive an offense when he's on the ice, essentially.
Yeah, and but you don't want him to turn into a Ryan Poehling, who does have speed, but is kind of a more one-dimensional hockey player and excels in the checking game. This is why we're worried. And Poehling also was pretty high of a pick also.
Was a first-round pick as well. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So was Scott Laughton. So you just don't, you don't want to miss out on that. But I like what he's saying. It's like, look, the 9-game trial is a tool afforded to every NHL team. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world to try to take advantage of it. Right? You get 9 games for free.
Especially when the kid has looked like he belongs in a lot of different aspects, right? And there's just a certain few things that have not clicked for him yet. So why not give him the 9 games? See if maybe some of that offense clicks a little more and comes around. Some of that, play driving kind of comes to the forefront a little bit more. And then maybe he does belong if that happens throughout the 9 games, right? Who's to say? So why not use it as a tool, like you said? So at least, the Flyers don't, like, at least they're mentioning that 9-game trial. And I think with them mentioning it, they probably realize that, hey, he might not be here beyond the 9 games, but if he is, we're obviously going to make sure that it's something that he's earned, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Is there another quote to bring up from Torts?
I don't have much else on Torts, unless you had anything else. I think we could probably skip ahead, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Let's move next. So, shout out to Jordan Hall. He posted the power play lines. So I figured we'd talk about them here. So the power play units as they stand right now. Top unit is Konechny, Michkov, Frost, Tippett, Drysdale. No real surprises there. The second unit, somewhat of a surprise, Brink, Luchanko, Forrester, Farabee, and Zamula. And obviously the surprise on that being Luchanko, and the bigger surprise is that Sean Couturier does not find himself on the power play. Not only is he the best faceoff man on the Flyers, but obviously has had a history of being above or at least around a point per game player in the league. Part of me feels like some of this is like kind of challenging Couturier. It kind of feels like that all season. And also with the comment that he said, like, because I didn't think Coots looked bad at all, but kind of challenging Coots to get more. That, like, just because you're captain doesn't mean you're guaranteed anything on this team.
And just to sort of cut you off, but one thing too is during the press conferences throughout the whole training camp, I remember one quote and it really grabbed me. And basically, I don't know who it was that asked the question, but they said, with Sean Couturier's injuries, do you think he's going to be ready for this season? And then Tortorella just said, well, I hope so. And I think that also plays into this in a sense a little bit.
No, I agree, but he's done that to everybody. He's done that to Cam York. He did that to Jamie Drysdale in this one, right? I don't even know if he could play a defense. He did the same thing to York last year. So just because he's saying something publicly does not mean he really doesn't see anything from the guy. I've already learned that about Tortorella.
Well,
But
he's already had these conversations too. Like if he's saying something about a player in the media, you damn well better believe that he said this to the player's face as well.
Yes.
So.
And not only that, if he had no faith in the guy producing offense, why would he be the top line center on the team?
Yeah, exactly.
With Michkov and TK. I think it is a challenge, right? And the PK was so good last year, and the power play was been so abysmal, embarrassingly bad, right? You don't really need to challenge the PK because, quite frankly, they were excellent last year. But the power play needs to be challenged, right? Michkov is a no-brainer, but putting Luchanko on there is kind of like, well, we don't, like Sean Couturier didn't have a good season last year, especially on the power play.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it's the mentality continues of next man up, and they're going to go with it. And like you said, Luchanko needs a power play time. So this is probably part of that 9-game trial mentality. He's like, hey, if we're going to call him up here, we're going to play him. We're going to play him. We're going to put him in a position to succeed. So he needs to grab the bull by the horns and produce because we're going to give him power play time. We're going to give him PK time as well, as he stated publicly.
And maybe, too, it is also an effect of Tortorella wanting to see that offense come around for Couturier, like 5-on-5 again, before he gives him that power play time. It's a little puzzling to me because he's the captain, he's a veteran, so it's kind of like almost like a fuck you, really, to your captain.
I feel like he's doing it to the whole team, though.
No,
that's what
for sure. But it is a challenge to Couturier, definitely. But it is a challenge to the team in the sense that, hey, the power play's been so bad. Look who was on the power play all season last season, and it was so bad. We're gonna switch it up, and it better get better, essentially, right? Like that's kind of the challenge they're putting forward to the team. But as Couturier, like, being a veteran, being the captain, he's probably thinking to himself, like, what is going on here? I can't imagine that he is happy to not be on the top 2 power play units, right? So that's probably something that he sees, and it's probably something that motivates him, where he says, hey, like, I'm not on these units. I'm an established veteran. I've scored, a ton of goals in the power play in the NHL before. I'm going to make sure I start my season right to ensure that I get back on those power plays. So there was a method to the madness in terms of trying to, like, motivate a player, light a fire under somebody's ass. So it's interesting, like, in terms of the actual units, I mean, I like the makeups, like Konechny, Michkov, Frost. I think you have your 3 most talented power play players probably playing together there. So that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, Drysdale as well.
I am a little worried about it because the top unit, because who's the big man on that line? We'll see how they excel.
I'm guessing they're gonna put Konechny at the net front. That probably makes the most sense to me.
I guess he's the bumper.
I would assume, right? Because I would think you'd want to have Michkov on the right half wall, and then on the other half you maybe want to have Frost or Tippett. I don't really know. So we'll have to see what they do, but we haven't really seen that unit in the preseason together, right? So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like in the regular season. I do believe the second unit we did see in the preseason a bit, and it was mainly like Zamula and Brink running things. Zamula, Brink, Forster, right? That had a bit of a trio going on in terms of the umbrella at the top of the blue line. So we'll see if they kind of keep those guys at the top there, and they're running, things versus like a fair B.
Yeah, we'll see how it plays out. Again, they can't do any worse. So I'm excited to see how the power play executed. It looked half decent in the preseason, but
and with Michkov too, it's a whole other element, obviously.
Yeah, he's a game changer and a healthy Drysdale.
Yeah, that as well. So I'm interested to just see how the power play works. One thing to bring up, and like, this is the weird thing for me, is if you look at the power play units, and this goes back to Couturier, right? Like, literally every single forward in the top 9 is on the power play except for him. And that's, that's strange. He's the captain. It's just strange to start off, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. But again, I think there is a method to Tortorella's madness. He has challenged a lot of players on this team, Frost being another one. Notice there's no Frost controversy right now.
I'm sure there will be at some point.
Right. He's challenged Farabee. He's challenged a lot of guys on this team. So we'll see. Again, I don't blame Tortorella because of the second half of Couturier's season. We were around for Couturier. He wasn't. So
It's also exactly right. Like he wasn't around to see those seasons, so he wants to see it from him now. Obviously, I think that's a kind of a big factor. So we'll see where it goes. I mean, I expect Coots to get back in the power play at some point here because that's just the nature of it. And I guess to think about it, like it's not like you can really be or point to the power play and say, "Wow, like they took Sean Couturier off the power play." I mean, they were last in the league last year, so
by far.
it's
Yeah.
not like they broke something that was working. So
Yeah, and if Luchanko gets sent back, I mean that's Couturier's spot most
exactly.
likely. And if Couturier excels this year, that might actually push Luchanko out in general. You
Yeah.
know, because like you said, that this a lot of this comes from the insecurity at center, and understandably so. We all know what the biggest need on this team is, and it's a number one center, a true number one center. That would shift everything. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. Let's do a break here and then we'll continue with the rest of the topics. So just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you are listening right now and you're not subscribed, please do so. It's the best way to support us. And give us a like on the video as well. Hit the notification bell for notifications. And for the audio versions, go to iTunes and Spotify and give us a rating there as well. And give us a follow. So all of that is the best way to support us. Thank you. Okay, the other thing I wanted to bring up, this would be short lived, but I did watch both episodes of The Standard. Both of them
Very well produced.
Yeah,
first of
loved
all.
it. The one thing I was thinking about is like, why are these not on TV like in the week leading up to
Like
the season?
NBC on NBC Sports Philly, for example.
Yeah, you know, like they're really well produced. It's a great way to introduce, you know, casual fans to Michkov and Luchanko and a lot of the players on this team, because this team is, in comparison to the Sixers and the Eagles and the Phillies, you know, they're kind of an afterthought right now. So I just thought that was something that they need to consider, is like they're 20-minute episodes just about. If I assume they're going to do a third episode here to end for the end of
Show
training
all
camp.
3 in like an hour or something.
Yeah,
an hour programming.
that's exactly what I was thinking. Is like you could have filled a full hour on TV to get people pumped up, but
I mean, it's a really good point. I think it's a little puzzling in the sense too that Comcast, you know, owns the team and they also own NBC Sports Philadelphia. So it's like, why not partner together and just here's an hour of original content? I'm guessing it has to do with some sort of like either potentially advertising, like maybe no advertising wants that playing while their ads are showing. Like I really don't know.
I don't think so.
Or maybe it's like a programming thing where they already have things programmed in. The schedule set, you can't budge and kind of slip that in. I really don't know how any of this stuff works in terms of like the back end for TV, but
it would have been great. It would have been great because it's really well done. It's like,
you know what I love the most out of that whole series is the narration from Bill Clement. That's probably my favorite part. I mean, just what a great job.
Yeah, from top to bottom, I really enjoyed it. So I'm a little surprised. You know, I don't expect it to be like on the NHL Network or, you know, because other teams do their own version of this. I ended up watching some of the Calgary Flames version. Like every team is doing it, but you would think that it'd be a great way to just get people ready for the NHL season, you know, for the Flyers season, just to try to grab a little bit of attention. You have a generational potential talent here, a phenom, rookie.
And from a marketing aspect, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, right? Like put this out there. It markets the team itself, essentially. People watch, they get excited, they get invested, they, you know, tune in for regular season games after that. So
yeah, well, it's beyond me. I'm no expert. All right, let's get into the prediction portion. We can talk about the Metro overall. So I'm kind of like bored of this to some degree because everybody's already put the Flyers second to last. But what are your thoughts on how the Metro will kind of play out? I'll let you go first on how do you think it'll play out this season from top to bottom?
All right, so the Metro's interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of teams that are going to be right on the edge there in the Metro. Personally, I think the top 3 is going to be the Rangers first, the Devils second. I'm going to put the Washington Capitals third, actually. I think they're really going to surprise with a lot of the additions that they made.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. I think Carolina is very overrated, in my opinion, this season. I don't see them having a great year. I think they've subtracted a lot of guys, a lot of pieces. Brent Burns is getting a little bit older. And I think you'll have the Flyers. My prediction is you'll have the Flyers in fourth, and they're going to grab a wild card spot with that four. So I have Carolina actually below Philadelphia.
Wow. Hot
That's my big
take.
hot take right now. Yeah.
Huge hot take. So how do you see it playing out for the Islanders, the Penguins, and the Blue Jackets?
So I see Carolina after the Flyers in fifth. I see the Blue Jackets in last. And I see the Islanders sixth, Penguins seventh. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah,
All right.
that's my prediction.
Interesting.
I'm probably gonna be wrong,
Sure.
but hey, it's fun to make
Well,
predictions.
that's why I don't like these, because they're
It's
so
hard not to be.
inaccurate.
It's
They're
hard
so
not to be
inaccurate.
wrong.
Yeah.
My thing with Carolina, and people are probably going to listen to this and be like, "What is this guy smoking? What is he doing?" But my thing with Carolina is subtracted a lot on the defense. Kind of ruined the relationship with Natchez. Like, he's on the team, but how is he going to perform after everything that happened? That and their goaltending. Like, I don't have any semblance of belief that Frederick Anderson will be able to stay healthy for a full season.
They do. They did have a good rookie last year too, though.
They have they have Kochikov. I mean, he's pretty good, but I just think, Anderson gets injured, you have him who's decent, and then what, an AHL backup? Like, we've seen how that has plagued the Flyers with Urson last year. So
Sure.
we'll see what happens. That's my hot take.
Okay.
What are we thinking, Yariv, for your Metro
Yeah,
standings?
I think Rangers will finish first. I think Devils have a good chance to take second. I do think Carolina will remain in third. I think the Flyers will be fighting for that fourth spot. That's where I see them, but I see them fighting with the Islanders, the Capitals, and the Penguins. I think it'll be very similar to last year outside of the Devils, kind of being completely on the outside, and obviously Columbus at the very end. I do think the Flyers are kind of like, again, we talked about this all offseason. The Flyers have a contingency plan for not being good. They have 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and it does not include any moves that they've made right now. Where somebody like Scott Lawton might be actually finding the end of his tenure here, which people might not believe, but this is actually the season where I think Scott Lawton could be traded. But I do see the Flyers being in a bubble fighting spot the entire year. If they
I agree. Yeah.
improve the way I think they're going to improve, I think there's a good chance they are better than the Penguins, the Caps, and the Islanders. I think the Islanders are definitely overrated by the media, like heavily overrated. I think the Penguins are old, but I do believe in Sidney Crosby. I think the Capitals are a little bit of a mess, and I think they way exceeded what they were supposed to do last year. I don't think they're a great team defensively, but they did improve defensively. So I don't know. I see them all kind of being in that same bubble: Flyers, Canes, Penguins, and Capitals, and we'll see.
Yeah,
how it plays out.
I think it's going to be a really competitive division, so it's hard to kind of place every single team. But I agree. I think those are the teams that you mentioned, like Capitals, Flyers, Hurricanes, Penguins. Those are going to be the teams really fighting for that, bubble playoff spot and kind of being in the mix for either that third Metro spot or, a final wild card position, essentially.
With the Canes, I have a little more faith in Brindamore, and I really like Shane Gostisbehere. I think he's undervalued. I think he could play a big role there for them offensively. So I'm curious to see how it comes out. I definitely see him taking a step back. But in that case, that's why I see them as 3 instead of 1 or 2, where they have been back in the day. So we shall see. I wouldn't be shocked if they're worse than people think either, though.
I just think the center depth for me, like, they have Aho, but then you have Kotkaniemi's in that second line, Jordan Stahl 3C. Like, is Kotkaniemi? Yeah, is Kotkaniemi really a 2C in the league? I mean, I don't know, but you can make the argument you can make the argument that the Flyers center depth isn't great either. Right. So there's a lot of things to point at, but that's why these are predictions, right? We don't really know until it all unfolds, but this is just what I think based off kind of the surface level view of it.
So let's do the 3 awards for the Flyers.
Sure, yeah.
We'll do the first one, the Bobby Clark Award, the team MVP.
I think this was a no-brainer, right, Yariv?
Well, to some degree, but I wouldn't say it's a complete no-brainer because I think Travis Konechny has been the best player on the Flyers. Who is your choice?
Just from what I've seen in the preseason, I'm going to say Matvei Michkov is going to be the MVP. That's obviously a lot of expectations to put on him, but just from what I've seen, I mean, he's looked like the best player on the team offensively already. It is preseason. You got to take it with a grain of salt. Guys are not giving their full effort. You're not playing, full NHL lineups. He still has to acclimate to that and that real NHL pace because things will get faster. They will get harder, but he does not seem to have, had any issues acclimating himself to the preseason. I don't really see any of that plaguing him once the NHL regular season begins. So my pick will be Matvei Michkov. How about yourself?
So mine is Michkov, but I am giving a caveat to Sean Couturier because if he does rebound,
I like that.
Yeah, you're supposed to pick one, but I'm kind of on the fence. Like I do think I think it's between three guys, and it's going to be Michkov, TK, or Coots. And I think Coots had. Well, there's also another guy, but I'm giving him a different award. I do think that Coots has the ability, if he rebounds and he gets pushed by Tortorella properly, and he becomes his old self, he will end up being MVP of this team because the player that he was in his prime would have been MVP.
Yeah.
So, and that means Coots in all situations.
That's a fair assessment. I mean, if we're gonna do like a kind of second pick here, my other guy that I was thinking of was Urson. I think if the Flyers, make the playoffs, he has to be considered just based on the goaltending and kind of the uncertainty there. So I think Michkov or Urson would be my picks.
Yeah, I think that's a very smart pick. The Barry Ashby Award, Best Defenseman. Who do you got?
I have Cam York. I think he's really just taken a lot of steps from when he's entered the NHL. We saw how much he improved last season. I think with all the weight that he put on, another season under his belt in terms of experience, another season kind of understanding what it's like to play against top talent at the NHL level. I think he's going to take all that and do even better than he did last year. I think you have to factor in, right? He's still a very young defenseman playing against top lines for most of last season. How beneficial was that for him last year to get to play against all those top lines in, the midst of like a playoff push for a playoff spot when games really mattered, and now kind of carrying that over into this season. So I think if he can take a little bit of a step even more offensively, maybe get into that like 35-40 point range, I think he'll be a shoo-in for sure.
Yeah, my pick is also Cam York. I thought Travis Sanheim was the best defenseman on the team last year. And I think Cam York being so young, like you said, the experience he had, and I also have a much higher upside for him. I think he does have 50 plus points in his potential
for sure
as a defenseman. So I really like to see how he threads the needle, or how he pushes the needle this year, and how he improves his offensive game. But I do expect him to be the best defenseman on this team throughout the year. This year, I expect him to grow and become the guy that we hoped we were getting when we drafted him. And we saw glimpses of it last year. This year, I think we're going to see more of it. So Cam York is my best D-man. And the most improved, and I forget what this one's called. I forgot to look it up prior. Who do you got?
I don't know. Is it Yannick Dupree? Is that what it is?
Yeah. That might have. I can't remember exactly.
Dupree, we're close.
I think Dupree might be like the class act one.
Yeah, you might be right. Anyways,
I'll look it up.
I would pick for most improved. Like I was a little bit on the fence. I didn't really know. There's a couple guys I was thinking about. I am going to go with Bobby Brink as the most improved. I think it's a little bit off the board. Like I've seen other podcasts do their picks. The consensus right now seems to be like a Jamie Drysdale is the most improved, and I could see why just with the skating. But I think Brink just looks a lot quicker. He's looked good in the preseason from what I've seen. I really do think that another season under his belt. Well, this season he's going to be even more.
Kelly Lindbergh.
That makes a lot of sense. I don't know how we missed that one.
Yeah, Nick Dupuis is a class guy.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I just think with the year last year that he had, the challenges that Tortorella kind of made to him, he's obviously put the work in the offseason. He looks way faster. I think Brink's really going to take a step this season. I think he's really going to show a lot on the power play with the creativity that he has. So that's why he's going to get the most improved for me. I think he really steps it up and scores 20 goals this year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. My choice for this is Samuel Urson. I
Oh,
think
that's
he
awesome.
looked phenomenal in preseason. I expect him to be more consistent this year, and that's who I had. Is like that's why when you said a team MVP, I could totally see that too. If he does get team MVP, he might win both. To be honest,
Yeah.
but he last year he won the Gene Hart Award for work ethic and dedication, and I think it showed this year. And yeah, I think he's going to be really, really good. Ironically, the last time we had a really good Swedish goalie was Pelle Lindbergh.
That is actually really funny if you think about
So
it.
I think in this case, it'd be only
That's
right for him to
fitting.
get that award. Yeah.
That's literally fitting. So,
So and then I guess we can do the dedication, the Gene Hart Award too. Um, do you have anybody in mind there?
in terms of like work ethic, um,
Yeah, I guess it's a work ethic thing.
off the top of my head here, let me just think. I'm gonna say Ristolainen. Just with everything he's kind of
Love that.
endured. I mean, with the injuries last year and just people not really being sure if he can come back and kind of remain that consistent self that he's looked like under the tutelage of John Tortorella and Brad Shaw. He was their best defenseman in the preseason, in my opinion. So I would expect him to continue that into the regular season. So I think if he can stay healthy, that Gene Hart Award will go to Rasmus Ristolainen.
I think that's a great one. Yeah, this one's kind of a tougher one. We'll have to see how the season unfolds. I do think there's a chance that like somebody like Hathaway can get it. I love the Risto pick. I think it's a really smart one. The other one is if he makes it the entire season with the team, Jett Luchanko,
Yeah, I agree. That's a good one too.
to make
Well,
it
you
as an
just
18-year-old.
Yeah, just think about how difficult that is in general. That's work ethic, that's perseverance. So that pretty much encapsulates, what it would take for an 18-year-old to make the
Right.
NHL first off and then stick all season.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously Ryan Paling could get in there, Lawton. There's other guys,
Even
Farabee, who knows.
Cates, I think, right? If
Yeah.
he comes back in, let's say after being out to start the season and really starts to ramp things up and shows that he should be like an everyday contributor, everyday lineup guy once again, like I think that's a pathway for him to kind of get an award like
Sure.
that too.
Yeah. Yeah. That one's kind of a tougher one to predict. All right. So Calder run I have in here, but let's be honest, like, how do we think Michkov is going to do for the Calder? I do think he has some tough competition. I see a lot of people thinking Logan Stankoven is going to overtake him. I think people are really underrating Michkov. There's some people I will leave their name off that like they still don't want to believe it. I think it's Michkov's to take. And I'm also very curious to see if Jett Luchanko, if he does stick with this team, does he even not get considerations to win, but will he be on that board the same way that Tyson Forrester was, where yes, he didn't
Yeah.
get voted to be the top rookie of the year, even though he was the best defensive rookie of the season, by far the best defensive rookie in the year. And I don't think most people in the NHL were even aware of that. But can he get recognized in that sense? Because a lot of the best players in the league, they don't win the Calder. Lindros
Yeah,
didn't win the
I
Calder.
mean, my expectation. I mean, I called Michkov the MVP of the Flyers, so if that's going to become true, he's probably going to win the Calder, be right on the precipice of doing that. I mean, so that's my thoughts. Like, I just think the way he's played so far, the fact that he has KHL experience, pro league experience, where a lot of the other guys, um, other than Dustin Wolf, really don't, right? Like Macklin Celebrini's coming in from playing in the NCAA. Cutter Gauthier, same thing. Rucker McGroarty, same thing. So like these guys, even Will Smith, right? Like Stan Coven's had some AHL time, obviously. I think if there's going to be anybody to challenge Michkov, it's probably going to be Stan Coven, Celebrini, or Dustin Wolf. I think Wolf is kind of the forgotten man, but he's been really, really good in the AHL. I think he was the AHL MVP, or yeah, he won the American Hockey League Goalie of the Year 2022-2023, and then Wolf won the AHL MVP award in 2023 as well. So I think people are really sleeping on Dustin Wolf as a goalie, especially if Calgary does well this season. He's kind of their backbone, right? So I think you got to consider him.
The goalie picks are always fun, but I do expect it to be Michkov, and if anybody challenges him, probably like that trio of either Stan Coven, Celebrini, or Dustin Wolf.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And then Stanley Cup favorites. Let's be honest, every single person I've seen is picking Edmonton.
It's kind
That's
of
like
similar to Florida last
90%.
season, right?
Yeah. I think that's what people are expecting. I get it to some degree. Having said that,
I don't trust Stuart
Dallas,
Skinner, guys. Sorry to
right? That's
say.
what I was gonna say. Dallas has a better goalie. Nashville's got a better goalie. They've improved significantly.
Do we
But
want to pick
but
like
there are
four
no.
teams we think are going to be in the mix, let's say?
I don't even know if I can do that because I do think the winner is going to come out of the West this year. I'll say
Okay.
that. But I guess out of the East, my pick would be the Rangers to come out of
Okay.
the East, and then out of the West, I'm going to say Rangers Stars.
That's a fun one. I think with the East, I'm gonna go the same. Like, I think Florida's gonna be pretty good, but to get back to a final for the third year in a row, I think that's just really tough in terms of like the conditioning. And they've also subtracted some guys from that lineup. Like they don't have Brandon Montour anymore. That's gonna be a big loss for them, obviously. So I do pick the Rangers out of the East. And then out of the West, I'm gonna go a little bit. I mean, I say this is off the board, but like realistically, it's not that off the board because they have a great team. But I think Colorado's going to get back there and get back to the finals. For some reason, I could see it being Edmonton. I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in Skinner, and I have more faith in Georgiev over Skinner, surprisingly enough.
Okay.
So I think Colorado, just with, having McKinnon, having Rantanen, Landeskog's back this year, you have Makar. Obviously, they just have those pieces, right? And if it all lines up for them, I think they could make it there again.
Yeah. I wouldn't be shocked if Edmonton wins the Stanley Cup. They showed that they can
Oh,
play
me
team
neither.
defense. They really did a great job making it to the finals, and they took Florida all the way.
To the
So,
brink, yeah,
yeah.
literally.
And it could still be Florida. It could be Florida Edmonton again, which would be wild to
That would be
watch.
insane,
Well,
yeah.
we've seen it before with the Red Wings and the Penguins, right?
Yeah,
So,
back in what, oh 07, oh 08, oh 08, oh
yeah,
09.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, be cool. We'll see. I don't really trust it at this point, but I will say the league looks more balanced than it was last year as far as
Top
competitiveness.
teams.
Yes.
Yeah, agreed.
So we'll see, which is why probably everybody's picking Edmonton just because they are essentially the same team, but
That's the chalk
improved.
pick. That's the
Yeah.
chalk pick, right?
Yeah. And then we'll go to some news here. We wanted to do this last episode, but Jeremy Swayman was holding out. He did officially sign an 8-year deal worth 66 million, 8.5 million a year. This is pretty much what I thought he was going to make. I saw people arguing with me online that he was going to get 10. I don't think so. We were just talking prior to this. Shesterkin turned down an $11 million a year deal. Good luck. Nobody's going to give you more than that.
Especially as a goalie these days,
It's
right?
just,
When
yeah.
just
Go
look
ahead.
at other than Bobrovsky and being a $10 million paid goaltender, like look at all the teams who've won Stanley Cups recently and they have not put a ton of money like that into their goaltending, right? So I think if you just look at it that way from a cap management perspective, I don't think any front office wants to dictate or dedicate that percentage of their cap to a goaltender when they know that they could probably get similar to average league goaltending for considerably less and probably still win a cup if that average goaltender just gets on a little bit of a hot streak going into the playoffs. So
Yeah.
it's just a lot of risk, especially in a position that I think year to year as the NHL's gone along the last 20, 30 years, you have not seen as much dominance from the same goaltenders on a year-to-year basis. Like the early 2000s, we saw Marty Brodeur, Dominic Hasek, Patrick Watt dominate. I mean, you see obviously Henrik Lundqvist, Carey Price, but I think recently, like you're seeing a handful of guys that can be really good on any given year and could be elite, and then the next season they are not close to that or have a lot of struggles. So I just think there's a lot of inconsistency in the position right now. So it's
Yeah.
not surprising that teams are not willing to shell out so much money like that.
Yeah, I'm surprised they even offered him 11 million to be honest. But maybe just because the cost of living in New York is so expensive, that you got to kind of have to counterbalance that. But I would not give, and I think Shesterkin is amazing. I would not
Yeah.
give him $11 million a year. He doesn't even play all 82 games. So,
But it's not
Yeah.
surprising that Swayman signed. Like with these holdouts and things like that, it usually gets resolved before the season begins. It's not
Yeah.
really surprising. He didn't have much leverage, to be honest, because
No.
any other team, let's say even if the Bruins decided, hey, we're not dealing with you, we're going to trade you. Like, is any other team lining up to pay him more than $8 million a
Right.
year?
Like people are like,
You
oh,
might
should the
have the same
Flyers trade for him? I'm like, why? We're not going to give him more
that
than eight
much
million a
money.
year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Exactly.
So
The thing is, too, that's crazy about it is it'd be different if he won a cup or had like sustained playoff success. I don't believe the Bruins have ever gone out of the second round with him at the helm and net. And to factor in, he's only played 132 games, which is not a lot at all. So
right.
you're really investing into a guy that I don't know if he's earned. Like he's played well, but 132 games, that's not even like 2 seasons worth of play at this point.
Yeah.
So that's a little, a little crazy, but
I will
yeah.
say, as a non-Rangers fan who's competing with them, I hope they do give him 12 million and that they deal with that contract.
I'm sure that'll mess things up for them cap wise a bit. So
Absolutely. Okay. And do a quick hit here on the Phantoms. We mentioned it earlier. We kind of already talked about it, but Kolosov did play a game. The Phantoms got
he's the
spanked.
standout in those
Yeah,
games,
he had some
unfortunately.
he had a couple really nice saves that made highlight reels. I'm very interested to see how Kolosov does in the minors. I think he is the clear-cut starter on the Phantoms, and I'm hoping he impresses enough to get a call-up even without an injury. Because an injury means something bad happens, but I'd love to see what Kolosov could do at the NHL level, but I do believe he needs AHL time, and I'm excited to see how he progresses in the AHL because he might be too good for the AHL, or at least really good in the AHL, and do what Askarov is doing, and kind of make some noise. The very worst, he becomes a trade asset.
Yeah.
And again, a lot easier to trade when he's playing on the Phantoms if he doesn't really want to
And
stick
in
here or
North
whatever.
America.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, Kolosov, like we said, has looked good with the Phantoms. We'll just have to monitor and see kind of how he progresses. You have
Yeah.
to hope the team in front of him starts to play a little bit better because the last couple of games they just have not looked great. Um, and I mean, we haven't really seen a lot of offense click, which is surprising considering that we thought they would be a little better offensively with all the additions they made. But you do have to factor in it's early in the preseason. A lot of these guys have not played together before. The chemistry probably is, still being worked on. So I think we'll probably see that get a bit better
They
as the weeks
also
go by.
they also are not playing everybody in these games.
Yeah,
They're
it's not
still
a full
treating it
lineup.
like, yeah, but
It's similar to the
they still
NHL
got
preseason.
smoked in two of those games. Especially the first game, which they had a very sparse lineup. Zayd Wisdom did pop in some offense, which was nice to see, but we'll see how that team progresses. If they're like outside the playoffs again, I mean,
You
I
have
don't
to
know what
think
the
LaPerriere is on the hot seat at
yeah,
that point.
there's enough talent on this roster to be a
Yeah,
competitive AHL
definitely.
squad. And there's enough good young players and enough good veterans on this team for them to be one of the better teams in the AHL. So seeing them get smoked twice in preseason, though they did play really well against Hershey, still. All right, let's do quick. I'm just going to read out stats here, and then we'll talk about the most important player of it
Sure,
at
yeah.
the end, and we can go more in depth before we end it here. So Jack Berglund, right now, he has 8 games played for Farjestad. The under 20, he's got 12 points, 7 goals in 8 games, 5 assists. Very good start for him. He's played 4 SHL games with the men. He had 1 assist there. I think they're kind of using him as a call up, kind of back and forth for now. We'll see where he ends up by the end of the season, but obviously probably too good for the J20. Ilya Pautov has slowed down. He has 10 points in 12 games, so he's under a point per game now. 3 goals, 7 assists. Kind of expected him to slow down a little bit. Alex Siernik has 3 goals, 1 assist in 5 games, playing in that Allsvenskan league for Nybro Vikings. Santeri Silku continuing where he left off last year in 3 games. He's got 2 goals, 1 assist. Still scoring machine in the Mestis. We'll see if that continues. See if he gets a call up to play in the top league in Finland. Heikki Rahonen Started off with no points in 3 games. He now has 2 goals, 1 assist in 5 games. So offense starting to show up in the USHL. Good to see him there. And then he's going to college next year. Austin Malloyne, he's got 3 assists in 6 games. Not bad, +2. Playing in the USHL as well from Madison Capitals. We'll see how he develops. He's a complete wild card of a 7th-round pick. Brian Zanetti, 1 goal, 1 assist in 9 games in the Norwegian or the Swiss league. I don't ever see him coming over to the NHL. Spencer Gill, the guy who impressed and got an ELC, he's got 2 assists in 4 games, +6 in those games. So not a bad start for Rimouski. Do want to see some more offense out of him, but we'll see. Matteo Mann, back in the queue, which is interesting. He's kind of bounced around. He was in the ECHL last year. He's got 2 assists in 4 games. He's got 1 goal in 2 games, a +1 in the queue, playing for the St. John Sea Dogs. Jeez. Devin Kaplan has played 1 game, no points in that 1 game, but 19 penalty minutes.
All right.
Which is
fun start to the season.
Yeah, I like at least he took the aggression route. Ty Murchison, no points in 2 games, a +2 for Arizona State University. Another player I don't really expect to turn into a pro. And then the other one, Carter Southern. I will say in the one, when I was tracking him, in the 1 game he played, it was a -7.
All right.
Since then, he has no points in 3 games and a -5.
That's
the Portland Winterhawks.
That's not great to start.
It's not good at all. And again, Flyers don't seem to be as high on him as the internet community. And so far, he has not had a great start. But we'll see. He had a very good season last year, at least offensively. So we'll see how he does moving forward. And then I'll go to Bjarnason first. Carson Bjarnason had a terrible first outing. He was under a 9 save percentage, and he had 4+ goals against in that 1 game. After 2 games, he's got a 2.51 goals against average and a .931 save percentage. So big bounce back game. 1-1 on the season. Those numbers are actually very good for him because his numbers have been terrible in the WHL playing for Brandon. We'll see how he does, but these are the type of stats I hope to see as the season continues.
Yeah, you want to see him improve, and I mean, like, Brandon's had a bad team, so hopefully he can kind of at least get, a little more help from the team in front of him this season versus last.
But he's older now. He needs to be the backbone of the team. I think it's like I don't think it's necessarily bad he plays in front of a bad team because I don't care much about his stats. Right.
Lots of shots.
High volume, be the backbone of your team. We saw that with Erison. He played on a terrible team. Speaking of somebody who plays on a terrible team, this is the Pierre Resistance of the Flyers prospect pool right now, especially with Luchanko getting the call with the big squad. Igor Zavragin in 6 games is 3-3 for HC Sochi, 2.21 goals against, and a .941 save percentage. Extremely impressive for the
as
KHL.
A 19-year-old.
Yes, and he just recently won Rookie of the Week. Demidov did take Rookie of the Month, but Zavragin got Rookie of the Week. His numbers, he got a shutout the other game. He also had a 41 save performance against
43 shots. Yeah.
43 shots in the game. Igor Zavragin right now playing like he is the next great Russian goalie in the world. He will probably get pulled from Sochi and brought into SKA. I can imagine, if not this season, definitely next year he's going to be playing with the team. But what a hell of a start for this kid. And he might end up being a legit star blue chip prospect at this point if he continues what he's doing. I believe he will be national headline type of goalie in the way that Askarov is, because this is extremely impressive to be doing for one of the worst teams in the league. Very, very good performance by Igor Zavragin.
Yeah, and there was a report as well by Hockey News Hub yesterday that there was rumors circulating that Zavragin might be heading back to SKA again, but still nothing official, like you said. So we'll see what happens. But I imagine if he's playing this well, and he's behind a Sochi team that is not very good. Scott's probably seeing this and saying, how good would this kid be behind our team right now? And they're like, let's get him back here. He's better than some of the other goalies that we have. But just very encouraging to see for a 19-year-old kid to step into arguably probably like out of the second or third best pro hockey league in the world and put up those numbers is insane, especially with this team in front of him. And you usually just don't see goalies at such a young age really excel at these pro league levels yet. So he's just way ahead of development in terms of, when goalies typically mature and when goalies typically will take those steps into pro leagues. Usually for goalies, it's like between 22 and 24 where like they'll enter that AHL conversation or something like that, right?
Yeah. And again, last year he dominated the VHL and the MHL. Yeah. And now he's just continuing where he last left off. And
it's
already
exciting.
Have a shutout for such a bad team.
It's exciting to see a goalie that young, play that well. So the Flyers look to have a gem in Zavragin.
Igor Zavragin. Having Bjarnason and Zavragin behind Kolosov, Ersin, and Fedotov, I gotta say,
really not bad.
And the fact that they lost Carter Hart, like who was
still
himself, like wow. Times have definitely changed. I know the league hasn't picked up on that. Like everybody says, the Flyers don't have good goaltending, and maybe we're not there where we want to be.
The depth is there.
I will say, I think a lot of people are going to be shocked around the league how good Samuel Ersson is, because most people don't pay attention in depth like we do on the team, and they think he just like isn't that good and he's just inconsistent. But if you actually watch Ersson, he is really good. I don't know if he's on Carter Hart's level, but he has an opportunity to definitely be a really good NHL goaltender. Yeah. And not just one that's passable, like one of the better ones in the league that teams would covet. Like maybe he can hit like what UC Soros did. And Soros took some time, right? He didn't come into the league and
took years,
right? It took a while to develop him. So we'll see. All right, dude. We hit our... Well, not 2 hours, but we're not that far away from it. Anything else you want to leave people with?
No, just, I'm going to continue to have articles coming up as the season ramps up and as things start and just kind of like assessing. I think my goal is, after 5 games, I kind of want to have pieces just dissecting what I saw and like what stood out to me, and then maybe do like a big piece at like 20 games to really dissect like what I think this team is. So keep an eye out for that stuff. And if you want to read more about Jett Luchanko, check out my article that I put up on Monday, kind of analyzing if it was the right decision for the Flyers. And just really appreciate everybody checking, the written workout and supporting us in terms of like flyersdailygritty.com and checking out all the articles there.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, thank you everybody for listening. Want to give a shout out to our sponsors again. Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks. They have one of the best, if not the best, cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance consultation needs. It will help you with your insurance claims. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Shout out to Sports Spider, the aggregator of sports content with podcasts, videos, articles, and everything on your Philadelphia Flyers and the NHL or all sports in general. Again, the link is in the description. And also want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. If you've gone this far and you're not subscribed, please do so. And also hit the notification bell to get notified when we release our episodes. And again, the audio versions of this are available on Spotify and iTunes. Give us a follow there as well, and a rating to also support our podcast. Thank you again for listening. The season is just around the corner. Next week, we're going to actually have games to talk about, NHL games that matter, and we cannot wait. So thank you all for listening. We love you, and remember, always stay gritty.